Hi there, my name is Ashley Coons and I'd like to welcome you back to my channel. Thanks for stopping by. Today I thought it would be fun if I did a different kind of art video. So today we are going to be recreating the Starry Night painting by Vincent van Gogh. This is my recreation of it. So I'm going to be showing you my process of how I created it, but then also I'm going to be telling you about the life and art of Vincent. So if you're interested in something like that, please stay tuned. And if you have any suggestions for other artists that you'd like to see in the future, leave them down in the comment box below and I'll read them and consider them. Yeah, please like and subscribe if you enjoy this video, and let's get into it. Today we are going to talk about one of the most famous artists who ever lived, Vincent van Gogh. Vincent moved around a lot in his life and is known to have suffered from illnesses for many years. It is believed that Vincent suffered from many illnesses, including epilepsy, which was believed to be caused by a lesion on his brain, bipolar disorder, which would explain his high highs and very low lows, and mania, and alcoholism, lead paint poisoning from his paints from when he would wet his brushes in his mouth, and possibly also sunstroke. Vincent spent a lot of time outside in the sun painting, and it's possible that could have contributed to his episodes of hostility, stomach issues, and nausea. A lot of Vincent's life was documented by none other than Vincent himself. Over the course of his life, he had written over 800 letters to family, friends, and other artists. A lot of the information that I'm going to be sharing during this video is actually taken directly from his letters. So let's get started into the life of Vincent. So Vincent was born on March 30th, 1853 to Theodorus van Gogh, who was a minister, and Anna Cornelia Carbentus, who was an amateur artist and a homemaker. Vincent was the eldest of 6 children, 2 brothers and 3 sisters. Vincent was surrounded by art from an early age as his mother practiced it, and he had 3 uncles who were also art dealers. His great uncle, who was also named Vincent, was a sculptor. Vincent was encouraged to draw as a child by his mother at a very young age. Vincent described his youth as austere and cold and sterile. In 1869, Vincent's uncle, Sent, got him a job at an art dealership. Vincent was happy with his work, and at the age of 20 was earning more than his father. It was during this time working for the dealership that Vincent became infatuated with his landlady's daughter, Eugene Lawyer, but was rejected by her as she was already engaged. Vincent grew more isolated and became resentful to his employer because of the way they commercialized art. He was dismissed from the firm a year later. Vincent went through a few jobs over the next few years, including an unpaid position as a supply teacher at a boarding school, a Methodist minister's assistant, and he also worked in a bookshop. Vincent desired to become a pastor and went to live with his uncle in 1977 to prepare for the University of Amsterdam's theology entrance examination. After Vincent failed the exam, he went to work as a missionary. The church authorities dismissed Vincent because he gave up his comfortable lodgings to a homeless person and moved into a small hut where he slept on straw. The church said that his living conditions undermined the dignity of the priesthood, whatever that means. Vincent then ended up back at home with his parents in 1880, and it was at that time that his father advised that his son should be committed to a lunatic asylum. In August of 1880, Vincent became interested in the people and scenes around him and recorded them in drawings after his brother Theo suggested that he take up art. A year later, Vincent traveled to Brussels to study with the Dutch artist William Rolfs, who persuaded him to attend a prestigious art school despite Vincent's dislike of former schools of art. Vincent left art school after a disagreement with an instructor and soon returned to Eton to stay with his parents in April of 1881. He continued to draw, and in August of that year, his recently widowed cousin, Cornelia Key Vastricker, came for a visit. Vincent was smitten by Key and proposed to her. She declined the proposal, so Vincent left to go to the Hague to try to sell paintings and to meet with his second cousin, Anton Mauve. Anton was a successful artist and encouraged Vincent to return in a few months and suggested that he spend time working in charcoal and pastels. When Vincent returned to Eton, he tried to convince Key to meet with him, and her parents described Vincent's presence as disgusting. Vincent was so infatuated with Key that he held his left hand over the flame of a lamp. It's believed that Vincent passed out from the pain and his uncle moved his hand from the flame. Soon after that, Vincent was introduced to watercolor and oil painting. Vincent and Mauve had a falling out, and he was soon hospitalized for 3 weeks with gonorrhea. After his release from the hospital, he borrowed money from his brother Theo to purchase more oil paints. I'm sure you've noticed by now that Theo supported Vincent both financially and emotionally. In 1882, Vincent had a domestic agreement with an alcoholic prostitute, which we would now say sex worker, but in his letters it was referred as a prostitute. And her name was Clasina Maria Sine Hornick. So Clasina was pregnant at the time when Vincent had met her, so it was not Vincent's child. And she also had a 5-year-old child. When Vincent's father learned of his son's relationship, he insisted that Vincent abandon her, and Vincent refused. Later on, Sine returned to prostitution and eventually gave both of her children away to a family. And unfortunately, she took her own life by drowning herself in 1904. In August of 1884, Vincent fell in love with Margot Bogman, who was a neighbor's daughter. They wanted to marry, but neither side of their families were in favor of the relationship. Margot was upset and she overdosed on poison, but Vincent caught her in time and brought her to the hospital, and she survived. Vincent continued painting and had completed several still lifes, drawings, and watercolors, and nearly 200 oil paintings in 1884 and 1885. In early 1885, an art dealer in Paris was interested in exhibiting his work. Theo made an effort to sell Vincent's works, but Theo said that they were too dark and not the bright style of Impressionism that he thought his clients were looking for. In August of 1885, Vincent's work was exhibited publicly for the first time. The joy of his first exhibition was cut short when one of his models for painting became pregnant, and Van Gogh was accused of forcing himself upon her, and the village priest forbade parishioners to model for him. Vincent then moved to Antwerp and rented a room above a paint dealer's shop. He lived in poverty and ate poorly, preferring to spend his money that Theo had sent him on painting materials and models. Bread, coffee, and tobacco became his staple diet. Due to his poor diet, his teeth became loose and painful. He was also drinking heavily and was hospitalized between February and March of 1886, where he was treated for syphilis. Vincent continued his art education into 1886 despite his declining health. During his lessons, Vincent became angry and often went into violent rage when he became upset with his instructor. Vincent then moved to Paris in March of 1886 to live with his brother Theo, and he stayed there while he continued to create art. Conflicts eventually arose between the brothers, and Theo found living with Vincent to be almost unbearable. By early 1887, they had repaired their relationship. In 1887, Vincent adopted the elements of pointillism in his work. Pointillism is a technique which a multitude of colored dots are applied to the canvas so that when seen from a distance, they create an optical blend of hues. The style stresses the ability of complementary colors, including blue and orange, to form vibrant contrasts. Over his 2 years in Paris, he completed more than 200 paintings. Vincent was now living in, I don't know how to say it, but it's Arles. Arles? Arles? I don't know, I'm terrible with these. But he moved there, and he had a very prolific period of creating work. He completed 200 paintings and more than 100 drawings and watercolors. During the last 2 years of his life, Vincent completed his most famous works, including Van Gogh's Chair, Bedroom in Arles, The Starry Night, the Church of Auvers, Still Life Vase with 12 sunflowers, Cafe Terrace at Night, and the Courtyard of the Hospital at Arles. I think I said that like 16 different ways, but we're going to go with that. So he was enchanted by the local countryside and light, and in his paintings he included harvests, wheat fields, and landscapes. Vincent reached out to a fellow artist who was named Paul Gogh and invited him to visit him. The two painted together, and Gogh completed a portrait of Van Gogh during his visit. The two, though, had a falling out eventually because Gogh was arrogant and domineering, and Vincent feared that Gogh was going to desert him, and that caused excessive tension in the relationship. Gogh also suspected that Vincent and Theo were trying to exploit him financially. Vincent realized that Gogh was planning on leaving during a period of heavy rain, and the two men had altercations. Gogh reported that Vincent came at him with a razor, and Gogh left to stay at a hotel. It is reported that after the altercation with Gogh, Vincent was assaulted by voices and severed his left ear with a razor, causing severe bleeding. Vincent bandaged the wound, he wrapped his ear in paper, and delivered the package to a woman at a brothel that Vincent and Gogh both frequented. Vincent was found unconscious by police the next morning and was taken to the hospital. He had no recollection of the event and believed he had had an acute mental breakdown. He was then diagnosed with acute mania and generalized delirium. Theo was notified on December 24th of that year of Vincent's hospitalization, which was also the same day that he had proposed to his lover, Joanna. Theo arrived on Christmas Day to comfort Vincent. There is speculation that Vincent didn't cut his own ear off and that it was actually Gogh, who was an avid fencer. In one of Vincent's letters to Gogh after the incident, he wrote to his friend, "I will keep quiet about this, and so will you." Vincent returned to the Yellow House on January 7, 1889, and spent the following month between hospital and home. He was suffering from hallucinations and delusions. In March of 1889, 20 townspeople petitioned the police to close his house because he was a red-headed madman. Vincent returned to the hospital. Later, he voluntarily entered an asylum. He described his moods at the time as indescribable anguish, sometimes moments when the veil of time and fatality of circumstances seemed to be torn apart for an instant. That sounds terrible. In 1889, Vincent gave his painting, Portrait of Dr. Felix Ray, to Dr. Ray. The doctor was not fond of the painting and used it to repair a chicken coop. Then he eventually gave it away. In 2016, the portrait was estimated to be worth over $50 million. Around the time of his death, Vincent had been lodging at Arles at the inn run by the Ravoux family, who had grown accustomed to him setting off each day to work in the surrounding countryside. On July 27th, he failed to return for his evening meal. Knowing Vincent's punctuality when it came to dinner, Mr. and Mrs. Ravoux and their daughter immediately began to worry. In the evening of July 27th, at 9 p.m., Vincent staggered into the inn, badly wounded. When Ravoux asked what he had done, he replied, "I tried to kill myself." Early the next morning, Theo was informed. He rushed from Paris to Vincent's bedside, where he remained until his brother died the following night. Many believe that Van Gogh's life ended with suicide. However, it's argued that it was in fact murder that brought on the artist's untimely death at 37 years old. For one, evidence reports that he shot himself in the midsection, and then he walked for a mile back to his room afterwards, which is kind of an unlikely scenario. It could be that Vincent's skyrocketing celebrity and persona as a tortured soul allowed the ruling of suicide to slip by with very little physical support and no indication that he wanted to end his life at that moment. He was finally getting famous after all. Vincent had written to Theo days before the suicide, and he was excited to be receiving a large shipment of paints. His last letters were full of hope and filled with talks about the future, while still littered with sadness. In the letter to Theo, written on July 10, 1890, just 19 days before he allegedly attempted to take his own life, Vincent writes, "Knowing clearly what I wanted, I've painted another 3 large canvases since then. There are immense stretches of wheat fields under turbulent skies, and I made a point of trying to express sadness and extreme loneliness. You'll see this soon, I hope, for I hope to bring them to you in Paris as soon as possible, since I'd almost believe that these canvases will tell you what I can't say in words, what I consider healthy and fortifying about the countryside." Vincent addresses his sadness and loneliness in the letter to Theo, but he also indicates that he plans to bring them to Paris soon. While it's possible that Vincent's death was due to suicide, it's also noteworthy that no one saw Vincent in the field that day, and it was reported that there was a young man who had been taunting and harassing Vincent in the days prior to his death. The gun was never found in the field, and neither were his paints, easel, or brushes. I personally believe that Vincent was a tortured soul, and the rumors that he was murdered make a good story, but the fact of the matter is that Vincent was tortured, and he suffered from mental illness his entire life. I believe he chose to end his life that day in the field. So Vincent's last words were, "The sadness will last forever." It's a testament to a man who was tortured by his own mind his entire life. Vincent died on July 29th, 1890, in the company of Theo and the Revaux family. At Vincent's funeral, his dear friend and doctor, Dr. Gachet, tried to suppress his tears as he stammered out a few words of praise, expressing his admiration for an honest man and a great artist who had only two aims, art and humanity. Sadly, Theo died 6 months after Vincent. His health had deteriorated in the months after the death of his brother. He was admitted to a psychiatric hospital in Den Dolder on November 18, 1890. He had been diagnosed in Paris as suffering from a progressive and general paralysis. Initial examination confirmed this diagnosis. By December 1st, his medical notes confirmed that he presented all of the symptoms of dementia paralytica, a disease of the brain. He died on January 25th, 1891. The cause of death was listed as dementia paralytica caused by hereditary chronic disease, overwork, and sadness. In 1914, Theo's body was exhumed from his resting place in Utrecht, Netherlands, and reburied with his brother at the wish of his widow, Joanna, so that the brothers could lie together eternally. Towards the end of Vincent's life, he really committed to his impressionistic style. Vincent's distinct brushwork and heavy application of paint became hugely popular and massively influenced by expressionism and abstraction. Vincent only sold one painting during his life, and that was sold to the sister of a friend for 400 francs in Belgium 7 months prior to his death. After his death, his brother Theo's wife, Joanna, set out to honor Vincent and her late husband by dedicating herself to sharing Vincent's story and art with the world. Without Joanna's dedication, Vincent's life work likely would have collected dust in closets and never would have gained the worldwide notoriety and appreciation it garners today. In 2017, a Van Gogh painting sold for $81.3 million at auction. So that sums up the story of Vincent van Gogh. One thing that I really find inspiring about him is that despite all of his illnesses, his mental illness and his physical ailments, he still always found a way to turn that pain into something beautiful. And I think that's really admirable. I really wish while he was still alive that he would have gotten the recognition that he deserves and that he has now. It's scary for artists to, you work your whole life and you put so much into what you're creating. And, so many artists never realize, the impact that their work has on people. And I really wish there was a way to go back in time and just, show Vincent that he was going to change the world of art forever and, have his own wings in museums and people would be flocking to see his work. I don't think that was something he ever even gave himself the opportunity to fantasize about, really. And, it's unfortunate that he had so many tumultuous relationships with not only women, but, just his friendships in general. And I think it's really beautiful that, his brother's body was relocated so that they could, spend eternity beside each other. I think that was a really sweet and kind thing to do. So that kind of sums up my thoughts on Vincent van Gogh. For the rest of this video, I think I'm just going to go ahead and read a bunch of his letters because there's hundreds of them out there. If you want to read more of them, you can Google them. I'm just getting most of them from the Van Gogh Museum website. So if you just type that in, you'll find it. And then you can go ahead and read some of these letters that he had written to different people. So we will get into that. And thanks for listening. September 29th, 1872. My dear Theo, thanks for your letter. I was glad to hear that you got back safely. I missed you for the first few days, and it was strange for me to not find you when I came home in the afternoon. We spent some pleasant days together and actually did go for some walks and see a thing or two whenever we had the chance. What terrible weather. You must feel anxious on your walks to Osterwicks. Yesterday there were trotting races on the occasion of the exhibition, but the illumination and the fireworks were postponed because of bad weather. So it's just as well that you didn't stay to see them. Regards from the Hannebicks and the Rooses, ever. Your loving Vincent. November 19th, 1873. My dear Theo, I want to make sure that you hear from me soon after arriving at the Hague. I'm longing to hear your first impression of your new position and lodgings. I heard about the beautiful souvenir you got from Mr. Schmidt, which shows that you did very well indeed. I'm glad that we're both working for the same firm now. Latterly, we've had quite a few paintings and drawings and sold a lot of them, and we still have a long way to go. It has to become more solid and lasting and substantial. I believe that there's still a lot to do here in England, but it can't be done all at once. And of course, the first thing we need is to have good paintings, and that will be quite a feat. Well, we have to see how it goes and do the best we can at the means of our disposal. How are the Novoettes selling in Holland? Here, there's literally almost nothing to be done with the ordinary engravings after Boschart, etc. The good Burin engravings sell quite well. Among other things, we've already sold around 20 artist proofs of the Venus, Adonomine, after Ingres. But it's delightful to see how the photos sell, especially the colored ones, and they yield a handsome profit. The Musée Goupli and C photos we sell only en polypitos. Oh my God, these words are so hard. Around 100 a day on average. I imagine you'll like working in the gallery in the Hague once you get used to it a little. I don't doubt your lodgings at the Roses will be to your liking. You should walk a lot if you can find the time. Bid a very good day from me to all of the Rooses. You must write and tell me which painters you like best. Both the old and the new. You must be sure to do this. I'm curious to know. You must, in any case, go to the museum often. It's good to be acquainted with the old painters, too. And if you get the chance to read about art, and especially magazines about art, the Gazette des Beaux Arts something. When there's opportunity, I'll send you a book by Gogh about the museums and the Hague and the Amsterdam. When you finished it, there will be an opportunity to send it back to me. Ask Ike Tierson to write me if he has a moment, and in particular to send me a list of the painters who were still awarded prizes at the Paris exhibition. In Somerville, still with the firm, or has he left now that you're coming? Things are going all right for me here. I have a nice home, and even though the firm isn't as exciting as a Hague branch, it's perhaps good that I'm here, and later on, especially when the trade in paintings becomes a little more important, I'll possibly be of use. And then I can't tell you how interesting it is to see London and the trade and the way of life here, which are so very different from ours. You'll have had some pleasant days at home. How much I'd like to see them all again, too. Tell everyone who asks after me that I bid them good day, especially the Tiersigs, Hennebeeks, Aunt Fee, Van Stockums, and the Rooses, and give Bessie Tiersig news of me sometime when she comes downstairs. And now, old chap, I wish you well. Write me soon, Vincent. Do you have my room at the Rooses, or the one you slept in last summer? December 23rd, 1881. Sometimes I fear you throw the book away because it's too realistic. Have compassion and patience with this letter and read it through, despite its severity. My dear Theo, as I already wrote you from the Hague, I have some things to discuss with you now that I'm back here. It's not without emotion that I look back on my trip at the Hague. And when I went to see M, my heart was beating rather hard because I was thinking to myself, will he try and fob me off, or will he find something else here? And well, what I experienced with him was that he instructed and encouraged me in all manner of kind and practical ways, though not merely by always approving of everything I did or said. On the contrary, but he tells me this or that isn't good, and it's because he's saying at the same time, but try it this way or that way. And that's entirely different from criticizing for the sake of criticizing. Or if someone says you're ill with this or that, that doesn't help much. But if someone says do this or that and you'll get better, and his advice isn't deceit, look, that's the real thing. And it naturally helps. Now I've come from him with a few painted studies and a couple of watercolors. Of course they aren't masterpieces, and yet I truly believe there's something sound and real in them. More at least than what I've made up until now. And so I now consider myself to be at the beginning of making something serious. And because of now, I have a few more technical resources at my disposal, namely paint and brush, and things are made new again, as it were. But now we have to put into practice. And the first thing that I must find is a room large enough to be able to take sufficient distance. Malv just said to me, when he saw my studies, you're too close to your model. In many cases, this makes it next to impossible to take the necessary measurements for the proportions. So this is certainly one of the first things I have to watch out for. Now I must arrange to rent a large room somewhere, be it a room or a shed. That won't be terribly expensive. A Labrador's cottage in these parts costs 30 guilders a year to rent. So it seems to me that a room twice as large as that in a Labrador's cottage would cost something like 60 guilders. And that isn't insurmountable. I've already seen a shed, though it's too many inconveniences, especially in the winter. But I'd be able to work there, at least when the weather is mild. And here in Brabant, moreover, there are models to be found, I believe, not only in Etten, but also here in other villages. Its difficulties were to arise here. Still, I loved Brabant very much. I also have a feeling for other figures that the Brabant peasant types, Schalvigen, for example, I again found unspeakable beauty. But after all, I'm here, and it would very probably be cheaper to stay here. However, I definitely promised him that I'd do my utmost to find a good studio, and now I must do and use a better paint and better paper. Nevertheless, Ingress paper is excellent for studies and scratches, and it's much cheaper to make sketchbooks in all formats from its own self than to buy ready-made sketchbooks. I still have a small supply of Ingress paper, and you'd be doing me a big favor if you could send me some more of some kind when you send back those studies. Not pure white, though, but the color of unbleached linen. No cold shades. Theo, what a great thing tone and color are. And anyone who doesn't acquire a feeling for it, how far removed from life he will remain. M has taught me to see many things I didn't see before. And when I have the opportunity, I'll try and tell you about what he's told me, because perhaps there are still one or two things that you don't see properly either. Anyway, we'll talk about artistic matters sometime, I hope. And you can't imagine the feeling of relief I'm beginning to get when I think of things M said to me about earning money. Just think of how I've slogged away for years, always in some kind of false proposition. And now there's a glimmer of real life. I do wish that you could see the 2 watercolors I brought with me, because you would see that they're watercolors just like any other watercolors. There may be many imperfections in them, but that as it may, I'd be the first that I'm still very dissatisfied with him. And yet, it's different from what I've done up until now, and it looks fresher and sounder. All in the same, it must become more fresher and sounder. But one can't do what one wants all at once. May 7th, 1882. My dear Theo, today I met Mauve and had a very regrettable conversation with him, which made it clear to me that Mauve and I have parted ways forever. Mauve has gone so far that he can't retract it, or at least certainly wouldn't want to. I asked him to come to see my work to talk things over afterwards. Mauve refused outright. I certainly won't come to see you. It's over and done with. In the end, he said, "You have a vicious character." At that point, I turned around, and it was in the dunes, and walked home alone. Mauve blames me for saying I'm an artist, which I won't take back because those words naturally imply always seeking without ever fully finding. It's the exact opposite of saying, I know it already, I've already found it. To the best of my knowledge, those words mean, I seek, I pursue, my heart is in it. I do have ears, Theo. If someone says you have vicious character, what should I do? I turned around and went back alone, but with great sorrow in my heart, because Mauve dared to say that to me. I won't ask him to explain such a thing to me, nor will I apologize. And yet, I wish that Mauve regretted it. People suspect me of something. It's in the air. I must be hiding something. Vincent is keeping something back that may not be divulged. Well, gentlemen, I'll tell you. You who set great store by manners and cultures, and rightfully so, provided it's the real thing. What is more cultured, more sensitive, more manly, to forsake a woman, or to take on a forsaken one? This winter I met a pregnant woman, abandoned by the man whose child she was carrying. A pregnant woman who roamed the streets in winter, who had to earn her bread. You can imagine how. I took that woman as a model and worked with her the whole winter. I couldn't give her a model's full daily wage, but all the same, I paid her rent and have, until now, been able to. Thank God, to preserve her and her child from hunger and cold by sharing my own bread with her. When I met this woman, she caught my eye because she looked ill. I made her take baths and as much fortifying remedies as I could afford. She's become much healthier. I went with her to Leiden, where there's a maternity hospital she'll go to for her confinement. No wonder she was ill. The child was the wrong way around, and she had to have an operation, which entailed turning the child with forceps. Still, there's a good chance that she'll come through it all right. She'll have the baby in June. It seems to me that any man worth the leather of his shoes are made of would have done the same in such circumstances. I find what I did so simple and natural that I thought I could keep it to myself. She found posing difficult, but she learned it anyway. I've progressed with my drawing and by having a good model. This woman is now attached to me like a tame dove. For my part, I can marry only once, and when would be a better time to do it than with her? Because only by doing so can I continue to help her, and otherwise hardship will make her take the same road that ends in the abyss. She has no money, but she helps me to earn money in my work. I'm full of enthusiasm and ambition for my profession and work. If I left off painting and making watercolors for a while, it's because I was so shaken by Mauve's forsaking me. And if he really were to reconsider, I'd begin again with courage. As it is, I can't even look at a brush. It makes me nervous. I wrote, Theo, can you enlighten me as to Mauve's attitude? Perhaps this letter will enlighten you. You're my brother. It's natural that I speak to you about private matters. But someone who says to me you have a vicious character, I stop speaking to him from that very moment. I couldn't do otherwise. I did what the hand found to do. I worked. I thought I would be understood without words. I was in fact thinking of another woman for whom my heart beats, but she was far away and didn't want to see me. And this one, there she was, ill, pregnant, hungry in the winter. I couldn't do that otherwise. Mauve, Theo, Tiersig, you all have my livelihood in your hands. Will you leave me penniless or turn your backs on me? Now I've spoken and shall wait to hear what's said to me. Vincent. I'm sending you a couple of studies because perhaps you'll see from them that she helps me greatly by posing. My drawings are by my model and me. The one with the white cap is her mother. Considering, however, that in a year, when I'll probably be working very differently, I'll have to base myself on the studies I'm making now as conscientiously as I possibly can. I'd like to have these 3 back in any case. You see that they've been made with care. If I later have an interior or a waiting room or some such thing, these will be of use to me because I'll have to consult them for the details. But I thought it might be good for you to know how I spend my time. These studies demand a rather dry technique. If I concentrated here on the effect, they'd be less useful to me later on. But I think you'll understand this yourself. The paper I'd actually like to have most is the kind on which the female figure is drawn bending forwards, but if possible, of the color of unbleached linen. I have no more of it in that thickness. I believe one calls it double ingress. I can't get any more of it here. When you see how that drawing is done, you'll understand that the thin kind can barely take it. I wanted to include a small figure in the black merino, but I can't unroll it. The chair by the large figure isn't finished because I'd like to put an old oak chair there. For this one, I'm just going to read an excerpt of this letter. It's a letter to Theo from Van Gogh. It was written on July 14th, 1885. And I just found this passage to be interesting. So it says, I don't know the future, Theo, but I do know the eternal law that everything changes. Think back 10 years and things were different. The conditions, the mood of the people, everything in short. And 10 years on, a great deal is bound to have changed again. But doing something endures. And one doesn't even easily regret having done something. The more active, the better, and I'd rather fail than sit idle. January 28th, 1889. My dear Theo, just a few words to tell you that I'm getting along so-so as regards my health and work, which I already find astonishing when I compare my state today with that of a month ago. I well knew that one could break one's arms and legs before, and that then afterwards that they could get better, but I didn't know that one could break one's brain and that afterwards that got better too. I still have a certain what's the good of getting better feeling in the astonishment that an ongoing recovery causes me, which I wasn't in a state to dare rely upon. When you visited, I think you must have noticed in Goggins' room that 2 number 30 canvases of the sunflowers. I've just put the finishing touches to the absolutely equivalent and identical repetitions. I think I've already told you that in addition, I have a canvas of Bearcreuse, the very same one I was working on when my illness came and interrupted me. Today I also have 2 versions of that one. On the subject of that canvas, I've just said to Gogh that as he and I talked about Icelandic fishermen and their melancholy isolation, exposed to all of the dangers, alone on the sad sea, I've just said to Gogh about it that, following these intimate conversations, the idea came to me to paint such a picture that sailors, at once children and martyrs, seeing it in the cabin of a boat of Icelandic fishermen, would experience a feeling of being rocked, reminding them of their own lullabies. Now it looks, you could say, like I'm a chromolithograph from a penny bazaar. A woman dressed in green with orange hair stands out against a green background with pink flowers. Now these discordant sharps of garish pink, garish orange, garish green are toned down by flats of reds and greens. I can imagine these canvases precisely between those of the sunflowers, which thus form standard lamps or candelabra at the sides of the same size, and thus the whole is composed of 7 or 9 canvases. I'd like to make another repetition for Holland if I could get the model again. As it's still winter, listen. Let me quietly continue my work. If it's that of a madman, well, too bad. Then I can't do anything about it. However, the unbearable hallucinations have stopped for now, reducing themselves to a simple nightmare on account of taking potassium bromide, I think. It's still impossible for me to deal with the question of money in detail, but I want to deal with it, and in detail, all the same, and am working furiously from morning till night to prove to you, unless my work is yet another hallucination, to prove to you that really truly we're following in Monticelli's tracks here. What's more, that we have a light on our way and a lamp before our feet in the powerful work of Brias of Montpellier, who has done so much to create a school in the South. Only don't be absolutely too amazed if, in the course of the coming month, I would be obliged to ask you for the month in full and even the relative extra included. After all, it's only right if in these productive times when I expend all my vital warmth, I should insist on what is necessary to take a few precautions. The difference in expenditure is certainly not excessive on my part, not even in cases like that. And once again, either lock me up in a madhouse straight away, I won't resist if I'm wrong, or let me work with all of my strength while taking the precautions I mention. If I'm not mad, the time will come when I'll send you what I've promised you from the beginning. Now these paintings may perhaps be faded for dispersal, but when you, for one, see the whole of what I want, you will, I dare hope, receive a consolatory impression from it. You saw, as I did, a part of the fair collection file passed in the little window in the farmer's shop in Rue Lafayette, didn't you? You saw, as I did, that the slow procession of canvases that were previously despised were strangely interesting. Good. My great desire would be that sooner or later you should have a series of canvases from me that could also file past in the exact same shop window. Now, in continuing the furious work of this February and March, I hope I'll have finished the calm repetitions of a number of studies I did the last year. And these, together with certain canvases of mine that you already have, such as the Harvest and the White Orchard, will form quite a firm base. During the same time, so no later than March, we can settle what has to be settled on the occasion of your marriage. But although I'll work during February and March, I'll consider myself to be still ill, and I'll tell you in advance that in these 2 months I may have to take $250 a month from the year's allowance. You'll perhaps understand that this would reassure me in some way regarding my illness, and the possibility of a relapse would be to see that Gogh and I didn't exhaust our brains for nothing, at least, but that good canvases result from it. And I dare hope that one day you'll see that in the remaining upright and calm now, precisely on the question of money, I will be impossible later on to have acted badly towards scrupulous. If indirectly, I've eaten some of their bread, certainly, though, you as an intermediary. Directly, I will then retain my integrity. So this letter is the last one that I found that was written from Vincent to Theo and also his wife, Jo. The date of the letter was July 10th of 1890. Dear brother and sister, Jo's letter was really like a gospel for me, the deliverance from anguish which I was caused by the rather difficult and laborious hours for us all that I shared with you. It's no small thing when we all together we feel the daily bread in danger. No small thing for when other causes than that we also feel our existence to be fragile. Once back here, I too still felt very saddened and had continued to feel the storm that threatens you also weighing upon me. What can be done? You see, I usually try to be quite good-humored, but my life too is attacked at the very root. My step is also faltering. I feared, not completely, but a little nonetheless, that I was a danger to you living at your expense. But Joe's letter clearly proves to me that you really feel that for my part I am working and suffering like you. There, once back here, I set to work again, the brush, however, almost falling from my hands. And knowing clearly what I wanted, I've painted another 3 large canvases since then. There are immense stretches of wheat fields under turbulent skies, and I made a point of trying to express sadness, extreme loneliness. You'll see this soon, I hope, for I hope to bring them to you in Paris as soon as possible, since I'd almost believe that these canvases will tell you what I can't say in words, what I consider healthy and fortifying about the countryside. Now the third canvas is Daubigny's Garden, a painting I'd been thinking about ever since I've been here. I hope with all my heart that the planned journey may provide you with a little distraction. I often think of the little one. I believe that certainly it's better to bring up children than to expend all one's nervous energy into making paintings. But what can you do? I, myself, am now, at least I feel I am, too old to retrace my steps or desire something else. This desire has left me, although the mortal pain of it remains. I very much regret not having seen Gallamagan again, but it pleases me that he's seen my canvases. If I'd waited for him, I would probably have stayed to talk with him in such a way as to miss my train. Wishing you luck and good heart and relative prosperity. Please tell mother and sister sometime that I think of them very often. Besides, this morning I have a letter from them, and I will reply shortly. Handshakes in thought, ever yours, Vincent. My money won't last me very long this time, as on my return I had to pay the baggage costs from Arles. I retain very good memories of this trip to Paris. A few months ago, I little dared to hope to see our friends again. I thought that Dutch lady had a great deal of talent. Lauderek's painting, Portrait of a Female Musician, is quite astonishing. It moved me when I saw it. All right, we are reaching the end of this video. If you stay tuned all the way through the end of this, I just wanted to thank you for subscribing, for watching this video. I hope you like the outcome of the painting. I was very pleased with it. Honestly, this isn't my style of artwork that I typically do, but I thought for this video it would be so fun to recreate the Starry Night painting, and I hope you're enjoying it, enjoying watching me create it as much as I enjoyed creating it myself. So, again, I guess just to close this out, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you like and subscribe. Leave me a comment down below if you'd like to see me do more videos like this. There are a ton of artists out there that we could talk about for days. So, again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I hopefully taught you something new about Van Gogh, and if not, I hope that it was at the very least entertaining. So, have a great day.